Hello everyone, this is Joel Davis, and I just got off the phone with Nancy, our newest team member, and man, I am so glad that I thought to record this conversation. She sent me an email, itemized email, explaining some issues with a client provider who, has been in business for almost 10 years. Seven-figure business, 35+% margin, doing well, but man, had faulty policies and procedures. Now find themselves in a bind, possibly getting fined upwards of $40,000-ish from the state. Man, I'm just kind of blown away. I literally just got off the phone with Nancy, so I'm kind of blown away by this phone call. Listen to the following phone call. I'm going to send this over to our peeps real quick so they can edit it. So when you hear some dead spots, they're going to have to cut out some of the names and some of the particulars. So if you hear some dead spots, it's not your computer or phone or however you're watching this video. Just know that it's not you or your equipment, it's the video. We have to, just like we would with you, if you become one of our client providers, we got to protect your information. We have to protect other people's info as well. So understand, when you do hear some dead spots, we have to protect our people's proprietary info. But man, this is an example where if you're just starting your business, your agency, that's great. Let's start your business the right way from the very beginning. But clearly we have people who have been in business for years, and they need help. They need restructuring, auditing, a lot of different things. And what's crazy about this is a situation, as you're going to hear, this is a business that's already doing well. I mean, you're talking about a seven-figure business with 35% margin on some of their workers' comp. They're getting upwards of 50% margin. So that's phenomenal. So it's not like these are rookies, but man, I guess I'll put it, the owner has allowed herself to develop serious blind spots, which has made her very vulnerable, as you're about to hear from Nancy. So rather than me sitting here and rambling and mumbling about it, I'm just going to let you listen to the following conference call. Listen to the whole thing, because man, Nancy just dropped some serious knowledge. So this is a very good call. I'm so glad I took her phone call here in my office, and I was able to record it versus just calling her when I was on the road or something like that. So God works in supernatural ways. So that was part of the plan. So anyways, watch the rest of this video. You're going to learn a lot. If you got any questions, feel free to reach out to us. When you do, I'll see you at the top.
Hello?
Yo, Sister Soul, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Doing good. Sorry for the delay, man. It's been swamped.
Oh, no worries.
Did I get you a good time?
Yeah.
Good. So, listen, I got your email with all the stuff about what is it sounds like you got your hands full. What's the lowdown on that?
Yeah, so, it's sort of a long back history, but, in kind of getting up to speed on all this stuff, but they essentially had a complaint survey, around missed visits. So, they had a client who, had a power of attorney, stands up, I don't know how this is going to work out, but anyway, and a caregiver. Caregiver is communicating with the client that she's not going to come do these visits, but that never got communicated back to the daughter and or the agency.
So the caregiver said they're not going to come back for visits. Why and who did she tell this to?
Well, she was communicating with the client that she was not going to come to X scheduled scheduled visit, and that she would come another day. So her and the client had this conversation, and whether or not those shifts were ever made up, that's still to be discovered. But so she never communicated back to the agency. So in this particular scenario, the state requirement is that they need to be able to show that the client was, that there was communication, the client's needs were met, the client was safe, and that they have worked to reschedule whatever that visit, needed to be. This in particular case is a Medicaid client, so there's a specific number of allotted visits per week that this client needs, obviously, right, based on need.
Right.
And so, so the daughter gets a hold of this information, finds out that there's been numerous times that this has happened with the caregiver. She contacts their state, their health department, launches a complaint. They kind of hear her out, hear what she has to say, and find it that, that probably should be investigated. So they come into the agency, meet with the agency's owner. And of course, when they first come in, they tell her that they're there on a complaint. And
did the daughter ever reach out to the daughter? Has the daughter even reached out before she contacted the state?
So that I don't know, because if she has, there's no record of that. There's no record that there was any. I'm gonna assume that the answer is yes. And the only reason I say that is that I feel like if there had been resolution, it wouldn't have gotten to this point.
Exactly.
So I'm going to assume yes, but again, I'm just assuming. So they come in, they ask for the active client list. They asked for an active employee roster, asked for policies and procedures, asked for their incident and occurrence logs, asked for their missed visit logs, like all these things. So they start by looking at these missed visit logs on this client, only to find out that there were no missed visit logs. So that was number one. The agency wasn't being communicated to. Two, they look into the agency's policy and procedure around missed visits. And the agency, mind you, has been open for almost 10 years. So they've had policy and procedure in place. Their policy read that with a missed visit, the first time it would be a verbal warning, corrective action. Second would be a written corrective action. And third, it would show a pattern. There could be up to and leading to termination. And so the surveyor obviously reads this policy, sees that their procedure is they should, have a missed visit log. They should have, there should have been communication in the EMR. There obviously should have been communication with the caregiver. I mean, and there are some circumstances, obviously, right, where there's going to be a missed visit, and it's justified as long as it's been communicated.
Is this all the same caregiver?
Yes.
Ugh.
So, yes. So to make matters worse, when they get into the EMR and they've asked for this employee's file, they've asked for the client's file, they go into the employee file, and the only corrective action that she had was actually a verbal warning that she was given, which had been like 6 months prior on another client, a totally different client. So on this client, this client that she's been on for like the last 3 or 4 months where this has been happening, there's literally no conversation, there's no documentation at all that anything has ever happened or occurred with this caregiver. So there's no verbal warnings, no written warnings, no, this is your last chance, you can't do this, you're not meeting the needs, nothing. Zero communication, documentation exists anywhere that this happened.
So they're basically violating their own policies then. Correct. And so what this led to, which is where this is where I'm at right now with this, is this naturally led them to believe that there could be other clients that had been affected by this, because the last corrective action that was in the employee file was like 5 or 6 months old on a totally different client. Yeah.
And so naturally that led them back then to ask the agency to pull a history on this employee back to her original hire date, so that they could go pull every single client that she's been on to see whether or not the plan of care lined up with all of the time cards that she turned in. So now that's one issue, right? One issue that we're dealing with is their policy was way more cumbersome than it probably needed to be. There was no way that they could ever follow all of the procedures every single time, 100% of the time, because they don't have enough manpower, number one. And they were not doing quality checks, which is another issue. But on the other piece of this is in their policy, it claimed that they were going to be doing these quality checks against their billing methods and making sure that the billing that was going out the door was all accurate. They would be contacting a percentage of their clients every month or every week, excuse me. Only to find out that those quality calls haven't happened it's been close to a year since the last documented quality call occurred, in which they were actually checking in on services and did services really occur. So now the issue that we have is we've gone back to this in particular caregiver, and there's now a couple of others that have opened up because the agency wasn't doing their spot quality checks. They were billing that money out to Medicaid with the assumption that those visits were occurring. So there was no. And so I've had a conversation with the owner to say, okay, but if there is no paper time card to line up or an electronic visit verification record to line up, why would you bill Medicaid for these visits? Why would you bill them? So that's an issue all in of itself. We had to have a conversation that there's probably penalties associated with this that could be significant. I mean,
how significant are you looking?
If I'm guessing just off the top of my head without, there's still some investigation. I told her she's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 40,000 in penalties, depending on, what they find in the rest of those client files, as that's going to have to be paid back as money that was, they took in, but those visits didn't happen. So then led me to have conversation with her about, her billing. The girl that's doing her billing clearly was not paying any attention to their electronic visit verification records and or time cards if they were exempt from EVV. So we had those conversations. I said the other piece of this is that you guys are not doing any sort of internal auditing of any kind. And I said internal auditing is imperative if you want to avoid scenarios like this. You self-identify, you catch the problem before it becomes a problem, right? And then when the state comes in, if you had identified this yourself and you were investigating it and it's on a quality management plan, 97% of the time the state will say, okay, we get it, you've identified it, you're working on it, you're trying to correct it, what is your plan and is it sustainable? That's what they're looking for. Unfortunately, none of those practices were in play. We're working on that.
I don't want you to lose your train of thought. So they started in 2015, right? So 9 years.
Yeah.
So when you're
they're 10 years coming up.
So when you were explaining this to her, the self audits and everything like that, I mean, what was her response? Is this like a new novel idea? She's 10 years in operation. Is this a new novel idea to her? I mean, how did we get to this point that 10 years in, we're having this problem?
Right. So I think, in total honesty, I think what happened is that this core group, I mean, she's only had a few of those positions. She's got 5 total positions with her 6. They've all been together for a period of time. I believe that they became somewhat complacent in kind of the day-to-day, stuff because things were just moving. Like they didn't feel like there was any issue. There was no problem. But they were not, again, they weren't doing like their quality checks. And their quality would have proven that there were some issues they needed to dig into.
So if they have 5 office staff, her with included, that's 6. How many caregivers do they have?
On their active roster, I believe they have like between 100 and 104, depending on. There were a few that were in the process of reactivating that had been gone for a couple of months, but between 100 and 104, depending on the day that you pull the roster.
So when did this start? Where they first identified that we're billing people and not showing up?
Well, the first incident with this caregiver happened in December of 2023.
Whoa.
And so now we're having to pull the records from, beginning of December of 2023 to current.
Yeah.
my suggestion, of course, there's only so much that I can, I gave recommendations. My recommendation that was, while this was an open investigation, which it is, I would put the caregiver, on a leave and explain to her that you have a due diligence process and that you need to investigate this because there is Medicaid money. Regardless, I mean, even if it was a private pay client, you should still put the caregiver on some sort of a leave until you can find out what's going on, because there is some fraud stuff that is going to be looked at, and I explained that. So the caregiver, they did put the caregiver on the bench. Essentially, told her while they're doing this investigation that they needed her to just kind of hang out.
Do you know how long the caregiver's been with them?
She was hired in October of last year.
So she was hired in October and started having problems within 2 months or less?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And the files that we pulled on the clients that she had been with, like, so she was all good from the day she was hired to the day that she, then this happened in like early December, which was the write-up. That was the first, it was really just documented that it was a verbal conversation. That happened in December of last year. That was the first known incident that there was a missed visit. So prior to that, on the couple of clients that she had worked with, there was no problem. And then it started with this other client. That client did not communicate with the state, but did communicate with the agency that she was over it. She said, I just can't, I have to have some stability, so I need a caregiver that will show up and be here on a regular basis. So they removed that caregiver from that client, put her on this other client, which is now the client that's daughter launched the complaint with the state.
So they verbally, pardon my ignorance, so they had a verbal counseling session with this caregiver in December, and they never set an agenda to monitor this or follow up in 30 days, 60 days, nothing?
No, and my conversation with the owner was, you've got these policies, like you've got all of this policy and procedure around these things that you are going to be doing. Quality checks, all of these billing audits, all of these things. But when we look at all of these things, none of those have occurred.
Yeah, they're not doing it.
So I said,
Jesus.
The red flag now to the state is that you have not followed your own policy and really trying to avoid the fraud, waste, and abuse. And I said, the thing is, and the key to this in being an agency that's going to continue to grow and can get out of the weeds of some of this stuff, is that if you're internally auditing on a regular basis, and this becomes a normal practice for the entire team to understand, this is what we do. It's not meant to belittle. It's not meant to, micromanage. It's accountability to the entire agency, and furthermore, to our payer sources and to our clients. If you're regularly auditing internally, and that becomes a normal practice, now what you are able to do is that becomes second nature. It's things that you're constantly thinking about. They're always right in front of you, and it's not something that you're like, you don't go into panic mode when the state walks in. You should be ready, prepared. You should be, able to show them your quality management plan, your internal audits, how often do they occur. Like, this should just roll right off of your tongue,
100%.
And you should be out of the weeds of all of that, and you should be focused on your growth and focused on, where are you going next to market, and how are you going to build this business and add another, diversify and add another line of business. But right now, you can't think about adding anything, because this plan of correction is going to have you in muddy water for a while until we can get this 100%, cleared out.
Well, let me ask you this. So, because I agree with everything you're saying, do you have any idea, like, what's their revenue right now?
They're on average, they're billing somewhere between $1,000 a week, and that's a lot of that is Medicaid. They do have some work comp stuff that are pretty heavy payers, but a lot of it is to Medicaid. They do have a significant Medicaid census. I mean, it makes up probably 85% of their client roster is Medicaid. But see, now they're on a hold with Medicaid while this is pending. They're on a hold, so they can't even take any new business or any new clients, because there's a possibility that there's going to be a payback there.
Exactly. So let me ask you another foolish question. Do you have any idea what their margin is?
Yeah, I mean, she's got pretty good margins. I mean, she's roughly somewhere between 30 and 33%.
That's phenomenal.
On most of them. Now it's higher on like those work comp cases, and she's got some private pays. She's got a couple of VA clients, so it's a lot higher. It's probably closer in the work comp. It's closer to probably 50% profit margins. But
so
again.
Go ahead.
And there's another, I mean, that's the other piece of this too, is that, I said, look, you're not catering just to, your Medicaid waivers. This is across the board. This should be a standard protocol for any payer source, because if at any point in time that workman's comp company comes to you and says, hey, we have an obligation to do an audit for our own financial, well-being, we need to do an audit of your, your client files and the things that you guys have submitted to us. I said, you don't have any auditing protocols set up at all for any of these payer sources.
So again,
the checks and balances are totally off.
So more foolish questions from a financial perspective. I mean, they're a 7-figure business with anywhere from 30 to, you said like some of the comp is like 50%. So let's say they're 35% margin right now. How are they not increasing their office staff? They got a 5 or 6 office staff with included. How are they not having more success, or why aren't they hiring someone? They clearly have the margin to do it. Why aren't they hiring someone else specifically to deal with the policies and procedures and the oversight and internal auditing?
Well, I think what I think happened is, right, they've all become so complacent that to them there was no need to hire another person, because none of them were, so busy that they were not able to keep it together. At least that's what they thought. Now, laying out a very different, for them, especially my explanation to her was, this payback money, this money that you're going to end up paying back, could do one of two things. One, could pay the salary of another full-time FTE in order for you to have somebody that do these things for you, or it pays, or you start holding your team to a higher level of accountability. You implement some processes that have to take place on a regular basis, and then that becomes, you then start putting KPI stuff together that then now drives whether or not they get a bonus at the end of the year based on productivity. If we're talking a $40,000 payback to Medicaid, if you split that amongst all of your internal staff, that's a decent chunk of change at the end of the year as a bonus. If you all are, if the agency is accountable and productive.
100%. Love that.
But I just think that there was, they had just kind of been rowing in the same direction for a period of time, and they, in their own eyes, didn't see that there was any problem with any of the practices, any of the stuff that they were doing. And so to them, there was no need to hire another FTE, because they didn't think that there was a problem. But I think, his eyes have now been really opened up to, some of the problems that she could have avoided too, and she's owned it. She's taken accountability for it. She totally gets it. But and I said to her, I get that your team has been together for a period of time, and I know and I value long-term employees that want to be with somebody that are loyal, but you need people that will operate with a high level of integrity and honesty, and they are ethical in everything they do. If those 3 things are not there, they don't have your best interest in mind.
So how is she receiving all this when you're telling her?
She was very open. She was very receptive. She's like, I agree, Nancy. I totally appreciate what you've said. I understand. I said, listen, I will help coach, mentor. I will help you hire. I will help you have discussions with your team. I will do whatever I can for your team to understand, what, we have to make a shift in this ship. And we'd like you to be here. We'd like you to be part of it because you've been here for a while. But you need to understand that with this ship changing direction, there are also going to be some changes in our day-to-day accountabilities and protocols and our KPIs and our stand-up and stand-down meetings. Everybody plays a role, and everybody will have a sense of accountability. So she's really receptive. She's very open. She does not want there to be any problems, obviously, with her business in the future. She wants to kind of get this all taken care of, get it behind her. And we did have a very transparent conversation, and that as part of this, and as some things become more, clear to her, she needs to emotionally remove herself from how long these people have been with her. And make a decision about whether or not these are the right people in the right seats on her bus. Exactly. And if they're not, that you're better off to cut ties and start bringing people in who want to be there, who know how to support her, who also believe in the same things as far as auditing and accountability. They're driven by, that constant need to want to do better. That I said, you've got to surround yourself with more people like that, Tabitha. If you want this business not only to stay, you want to grow this business, obviously. But I said, you can't do that with the current team that you have if they're not going to get on the same page with you.
Have you had any interaction with anyone else other than?
No, not yet. So her and I talked about that, and I told her to let me know how she was going to sit on that and think about it. And then I said, I'm happy to support you. I'm happy to help you walk through, how you want to have this conversation. I said, I don't have a problem. If you want to say, look, this is our hired consultant, I will do whatever I can to support you, but I need you to hear me and understanding that there are some things that you are going to have to change. You're going to have to change them. So I have another meeting, another call with her scheduled for Tuesday morning to go over a couple of other things. She's waiting on some stuff to come back from the surveyor, so that she can start her plan of correction. I told her that I would review her plan of correction. I did not tell her that I would be involved in helping her write it, because I said, you need to review all of your policies and decide whether or not your policies is the standard too high and you can't meet it. Do you need to rewrite the policy and submit that and say, we've made some changes as part of this audit? I said, but you've got a lot of things. So I gave her a list. There were like 5 or 6 things. I'm like, you need to seriously soul search these things and think about them. This task is not too big. It's a lot for us to do, but we can get it done. I said, it's just a matter of everybody's going to have to take a deep breath and get on the same page.
So when you told her that your policies may really exceed the standard per se, like they're too aggressive, did she comprehend that? Did she understand that? Did she agree with it? How did she receive it?
Initially, no. I mean, what I had to do is I had to explain to her, like, hey, you have this policy around these missed visits and you have a procedure, but never once have you met the procedure 100% of the time. So you've set the bar entirely way too high for yourself. And I said, listen, a lot of owners, what happens when they open a company is they want these policies and procedures to be like all glitzy and glammy, and they want them to be like this, shiny, gold figure that they hand to a state surveyor. But the problem is that what the state doesn't care how golden you think your policies and procedures are. What they want is something that you can meet the standard and it's sustainable long term.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what they're looking for. They don't care if your policy is 5 sentences long, as long as it meets, number 1, the regulatory standards, and 2, it's got sustainability long term. That's what they're looking for. So I said, and her policy and procedure manual is probably, it's probably close to 100 pages long, which quite honestly is crazy for a non-medical. That's crazy. But that's what she purchased when they opened in 2015. She purchased this from this online company, and that's what she got. And then she had to plug and play and push all of her stuff in there. So there was really not an understanding of, and my fear for her now is that some of her policies are going to not meet the standard in the state because they were written by somebody out of state. Now, I don't know whether or not this company does state-specific policies. That's one thing I haven't looked into with her because we haven't gotten there yet. This has really been around this missed visit stuff, but I have a feeling that her policies and procedures are going to have a major overhaul. So,
yeah, no question. It sounds like that. Let me ask you this, though. I remember when she submitted her information that I remember seeing something where she ultimately, her plan was to go after Medicare and be a full medical care agency. I mean, how did you, dude, if she did that with Medicare, she's like 10x in her problems. Did you? Oh
my gosh, yes. So I had that conversation with her, and I explained to her, like, if this had been a Medicare survey versus, a state or Medicaid survey, and there had been all this fraud, waste, and abuse allegation, and it was justified, we'd be having a very different conversation because you potentially have a condition level deficiency that could potentially close you. And so we talked about that animal, and she is completely 100% at this point. She's like, there's no way I would ever go after doing that now.
Dude, that's phenomenal.
So,
I'm glad.
Yeah, I mean, good
I'm glad
stuff there.
You backed her off that one. That's a wise move on her part.
Yes. And I explained to her, we're talking a potentially $40,000 penalty here. You could be talking, couple $100,000 penalty and have to have a consultant 100% of the time in your business helping you run your business for the next 2 years. I said, do you have any idea how costly that is? I mean, that's crazy.
So speaking of consultants, how happy is she that she has you on hand now?
Well, the other day when we got ready to hang up, she started crying and she said, I feel better knowing that I've been able to talk to you and that you've kind of talked me off the ledge. She said, I know that we have work cut out. She said, Nancy, I'm embarrassed by some of the things that happened because it shouldn't have happened. But she said, I am thankful that I, have you and that I can call you and you've been able to walk me through some of these things. And she said, I do feel better. I don't feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my business. And I said, I reassured her that was not the case. She would not lose her business.
Well, what made her think that she was going to lose the business over this? Did she think like the state was going to shut her down because of this or what?
Yeah. Yep. She thought because it was Medicaid, there were Medicaid penalties that they would automatically take her Medicaid number away from her and she wouldn't be able to do any more Medicaid business, which is a significant chunk of their business, which is not true. And I explained to her the importance again behind an internal QMP and these audit processes and what that looks like. And I said, you are going to be high risk for a desk audit, a couple of times probably over the course of the next 365. But that's okay. All it's doing is you need to keep reiterating to yourself and to your team that that's accountability. And that's what you're working for is a higher accountability. And there's no higher accountability than to answer to those, at the federal level. So I said, you got the state and Medicaid looking at everything you're doing. That's accountability. So I said, take that as an opportunity, to kind of revamp. I said, take a deep breath, spend some time this weekend kind of thinking about things you want to do and how you want to do them. I said, and we'll get rocking and rolling after I talk to you on Tuesday. So she was in a better spot when I hung up with her.
Dude.
So
you are awesome, sister. You are, man, you definitely got your hands full on this one for sure, man. So you are good, man. Well, I'm glad you were able to. Go ahead. Yeah,
and she's probably going to reach. She is probably going to be reaching out too because I think she's going to go. She's going to do some long-term stuff with us. So just be on the lookout. She may be reaching out.
Dude, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I credit it to you, sister, because you're our little savage beast. I love it. You are. That's awesome. I'm glad you're able to talk her off the cliff thinking that the sky is falling and everything's going to end for her, so that's good.
Yeah. I'll keep you posted. It'll be, like I said, it'll be next week before I talk to her again, so I'll keep you posted if anything, any significant changes come up. But that's kind of where we are now. We're waiting on some stuff from the surveyor and from the state, so I'll keep you posted.
All right, sister, I appreciate it, man. Great call. Thanks for the heads up, man. It's a lot of good info right there. Incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, sister. Take care.
All right. You too.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.